Picture this. You pick up your phone, just like you do every morning. You scroll to your child's name, and you send a simple message. Hey honey, just thinking of you. Hope you're okay. 1 hour passes. Nothing. 1 day. Nothing. 1 week. Still nothing. No call. No text. No explanation. Just silence. And you sit there wondering, what did I do? What did I say? Why is my own child treating me like I don't exist? If that sounds familiar, this video is for you. Because today, I'm going to give you 8 specific things to do when your adult child gives you the silent treatment. Not 8 ways to beg for their attention. Not 8 ways to blame yourself. 8 ways to handle this with dignity, wisdom, and the strength that comes from knowing who you are. For over 40 years, I've worked as a psychologist specializing in family relationships and aging. I've sat across from hundreds of parents, good parents, loving parents, who found themselves on the receiving end of the silent treatment from a child they devoted their lives to. And I want to tell you something important before we go any further. The pain you're feeling right now is real. It is valid. And it is one of the least talked about forms of grief that exists. Research suggests that parental estrangement, meaning a significant break in the relationship between a parent and their adult child, affects more than 1 in 4 American families. And in most of those cases, the parent had no warning, no explanation, just silence. Now, before we dive in, I want to make one important distinction. The silent treatment is different from a child who simply needs some space. Space is healthy. Space can be a sign of a maturing relationship. The silent treatment, the kind that goes on for weeks or months, with no reason given, that is a form of emotional withdrawal. And it requires a very specific kind of response. So let's talk about what that response looks like. 8 things. Let's begin. I know what your instinct is telling you right now. Call again. Send another message. Leave a voicemail. Show up at their door. Your heart is saying, if I just reach out enough, they'll respond. They'll remember that I love them. They'll come back. And I understand that, because that instinct comes from love. But here is what 40 years of psychology has taught me. The more you pursue, the more they withdraw. When we feel emotionally overwhelmed, we naturally create distance. It's a self-protective mechanism. And if your child is already in a place where they've chosen silence, bombarding them with messages doesn't feel like love to them. It feels like pressure. So here is what I want you to do instead. Give it 2 to 3 weeks. No calls. No texts. No emails. This is not giving up. This is not punishment. This is not playing games. This is giving both of you the room to breathe, and giving them the chance to miss you. Silence has a way of speaking when words cannot. When someone we love pulls away from us, our first response is often, "What did I do wrong?" And many parents I've worked with immediately send a message that sounds something like this. "I'm so sorry if I did something to hurt you. I'm sorry for anything I may have said. I'm sorry. I just want to fix this." Now, I hear the love in that. I truly do. But here is the psychological problem with apologizing when you don't know what you're apologizing for. You are essentially confessing to a crime you haven't been charged with. And what that communicates, unintentionally, is, you were right to withdraw from me. I was wrong. I deserve this. That is not the foundation for a healthy reconnection. That is the foundation for a dynamic where one person has all the power and the other has none. So ask yourself honestly, do I actually know what I did, or am I simply apologizing to end the silence? If you genuinely know of something specific you said or did that may have hurt them, then yes, a sincere, specific apology is appropriate. But if you're apologizing for existing, stop. You deserve better than that. Here is one of the most powerful exercises I give to parents going through this. I want you to write a letter, a long one. Everything you feel, everything you want to say, every question you have, every memory that comes up. Write it all down. And then, do not send it. I know that sounds strange, but here's why it works. When our emotions are swirling inside us, grief, confusion, anger, fear, they control our reactions. We say things we don't mean. We make decisions from panic instead of wisdom. But when we write those emotions down, something shifts. We begin to see them more clearly. We begin to separate what we feel from what we should do. And once you've written everything out, I want you to read it back and ask yourself just one question. Is there anything in what my child might be feeling that I haven't fully acknowledged? Not to blame yourself, but to understand. Because understanding is always the first step toward healing. When something this painful happens, the natural thing to do is turn to the people closest to us. You call your other son, or your daughter-in-law, or your sister. You tell them what's happening. And I am asking you, with great care, to think very carefully before you do that. Because when you bring other family members into this situation, especially children who are siblings of the one who has gone silent, you risk creating sides. You risk putting people in the middle. You risk turning a private wound into a family-wide conflict. I have seen this happen so many times. What started as a silent treatment between a mother and one child became a division that fractured the entire family for years. You need support. You absolutely deserve support. But the right kind of support comes from someone who has no stake in the outcome. A close friend who knew you before all of this. A therapist or counselor. A pastor, priest, or spiritual advisor. Or a support group, and there are many, both in person and online, specifically for parents dealing with estrangement. You are not alone in this. There are people who understand exactly what you're going through, because they've been through it too. This one is so important that I want to say it slowly and clearly. Do not ask your other children to pass messages to the one who has gone silent. Can you just tell your sister that I love her? Could you let your brother know I want to talk? Could you find out from him what I did wrong? I understand the impulse. When every direct path is blocked, we look for another way in. But what this does to the sibling you're asking is deeply unfair. You are placing them in the middle of a conflict they did not create. You are asking them to carry an emotional weight that is not theirs to carry. And you are risking the possibility that they too will begin to feel used, overwhelmed, and, eventually, resentful. And from the perspective of the child who has gone silent, receiving a message through a sibling doesn't feel like love reaching them. It feels like a boundary being crossed. The rule is simple. If you have something to say, you say it. Or it waits until the time is right. Now we come to the one that requires the most courage. I want you to sit with a question. Not to torture yourself with it. Not to spiral into guilt. But to sit with it honestly. Is there anything in your history with this child, anything you said, anything you did, anything you failed to say or do, that may have left a wound that was never fully healed? I'm not asking whether you're a bad parent. You're not. I know that. I'm asking because every one of us, every single parent who has ever lived, has moments we wish we could do differently. Words spoken in anger. Times we were too distracted. Ways we handled things that, looking back, weren't our best. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the silence from an adult child is the expression of a pain that has been sitting quietly inside them for years. A pain they may not even have the words for yet. Reflection is not the same as self-blame. Self-blame says, I am terrible. Everything is my fault. I deserve this. Reflection says, I am human. I did my best. And I'm willing to look honestly at where my best may have fallen short. That distinction between collapse and honest inquiry is the difference between someone who grows from this experience and someone who is consumed by it. Take your time with this one. It's worth sitting with. After a period of silence, at least 2 to 3 weeks, there may come a moment when you feel ready to reach out one more time. If that moment comes, here is what I want you to do. Send one message. Just one. Short, clear, and free of any anger, guilt-tripping, or emotional pressure. It might sound something like this. I love you. I'm here whenever you're ready. I won't keep reaching out, but please know that the door is always open. Read that again. Notice what it doesn't say. It doesn't say, "Why haven't you called me?" It doesn't say, "Do you know how much you've hurt me?" It doesn't say, "If you loved me, you would have reached out by now." It simply says, "I love you. I'm here. I respect your process." And then, and this is the hardest part, you stop. You don't send a follow-up. You don't send a second version. You don't text the next morning asking if they received it. You send it. And you let it land. The ball is now in their court. And you have done your part, with grace. And now we come to the eighth thing. And in many ways, the most important one. I have worked with parents who have put their entire lives on hold, waiting for an estranged child to come back. They stopped seeing friends. They stopped pursuing hobbies. They stopped living. And I understand why. Because when someone you love is in pain, or when you're in pain because of someone you love, it feels wrong to be happy. It feels disloyal to move forward. But I want to challenge that belief, gently and directly. You were a person before you became a parent. You had a life, a self, dreams, passions, friendships that exist completely independent of your role as a mother or a father. And when you abandon that self in the name of waiting, you don't just hurt yourself. You become someone who makes decisions from desperation instead of strength. Here's what I've seen happen over and over again in my decades of practice. When a parent stops revolving around the estrangement, when they pick up their life, reconnect with the world, and start being fully themselves again, something shifts. The adult child who was once comfortable in their silence begins to feel the weight of it differently. And in many cases, not all, but many, they reach out. Not because the parent played games, but because the parent became someone they wanted to reconnect with, someone full of life, not consumed by grief. So go back to that book club. Plan the trip you've been putting off. Call an old friend. Try something new. Volunteer. Paint. Walk. Breathe. Your life is not on pause. Your life is happening right now. And you deserve to live it fully, with or without this being resolved. Before we close, I want to quickly walk you through 5 things you should absolutely avoid during the silent treatment. Number 1. Do not post about it on social media. I cannot tell you how many situations I've seen made permanently worse by a Facebook post or a vague tweet. Even if you think your child won't see it, someone will tell them. And it will not bring them closer. Number 2. Do not involve grandchildren. Do not ask your grandchildren to pass messages, take sides, or report back to you. They are children, or even young adults, who love both of you. Protect them from this conflict entirely. Number 3. Do not use money or gifts to buy reconciliation. Sending checks, gifts, or financial assistance during a period of estrangement communicates one thing. I don't know how to connect with you as a person, so I'll connect with your wallet. It doesn't heal. It complicates. Number 4. Do not issue ultimatums. If you don't call me by Friday, I'm removing you from my will. If you can't treat me with respect, then I don't want a relationship with you. Ultimatums, even when delivered from pain, are experienced as threats. And they almost always push people further away. Number 5. Do not let this paralyze you. You are allowed to be sad. You are allowed to grieve this. But you are not allowed to let it become your entire identity, because your life is bigger than this moment. Before I let you go, I want to say something from the heart. What you are going through right now, the silence, the waiting, the not knowing, is one of the most painful experiences a parent can face. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how strong you are. When your child turns away from you, even for reasons you don't understand, it reaches into the deepest part of who you are. And I want you to hear me say this. You are not a bad parent because of what's happening. You are not unlovable. You are not beyond hope. And you are not alone. You raised your children the best way you knew how. You loved them fiercely. You sacrificed more than they may ever know. And now, it's time to do something equally important. It's time to love yourself the way you have always loved them. You cannot control whether they come back. You cannot force a reconnection, but you can control who you are through this. You can control the kind of person they will find waiting when they're finally ready to walk back through the door. So be that person. Be full. Be alive. Be the one they remember. You raised them. You loved them. You did your best. Now, do your best for yourself. If this video spoke to something you've been carrying quietly, I want to hear from you. Type the word peace in the comments below. Just that one word. Because I want you to know, you are not going through this alone. And if you know someone, a friend, a neighbor, a family member, who is sitting with this same silent hurt right now, please share this video with them. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do for someone in pain is simply let them know, I see you. I thought of you. You matter. If this kind of content has been meaningful to you, please subscribe and hit the bell, because we talk about these things every week. I'll see you in the next video. Take good care of yourself. And remember, you are more than what you've been through. Always.